The Great Steppe, millenniums of events, hundreds of nomadic tribes and people. They lived, worked, made discoveries, conquered large tracts of lands, and left us some mysteries. To learn more about it, watch the project called Enigma of the Great Steppe. Coming up today, unidentified item. Dombra is not just an instrument. Forbidden kobuz. Why do Chinese people fear throat singing? The steppe has always been full of special colors and peculiar sounds. And almost every nomad had musical instruments in his home. But it was not always the dombra as we usually think. At least a dozen musical instruments have been lost and forgotten. Why did this happen? One of the popular versions is that folk instruments were intentionally excluded from the life of nomads during the period of Soviet power. However, during the rule of the same power, orchestras of folk instruments were created. Forgotten instruments were restored, and existing ones were unified later. So maybe there was another reason. Who brought forgotten instruments back to life? And how is this possible as there were only names of these instruments? Why was the kobuz prohibited? And what kind of instruments are the Chinese people still afraid of? In 1971, archaeologists made excavation works on the ancient settlement. Once the life was bursting forth here, caravans were arriving and leaving and the trade was flourishing. People lived here, worked, and raised children. The most amazing findings of Otrar city are chess pieces made of ivory, lots of different ceramic items, metal products, coins, and samples of Chinese porcelain. They are evidence of the relationships with foreign countries and people. But one finding, as the scientists registered, an item with the size of a goose egg with 2 holes at its sides, is an absolutely authentic steppe item. This instrument made of clay and wool with the size of a fist was in the ground during thousands of years, and it came back to life. However, the times have already changed. Everything was different in the steppe. The nomads have settled and the most part of the Kazakh traditional lifestyle and customs have disappeared. And sasirnai, the instrument which was found, perhaps would remain as a museum piece, without the enthusiasm and perseverance of one scientist who returned the clay pipe to the list of functioning musical instruments. The horse nomadic civilization collapsed and our instruments were forgotten. Bolat Sarıbayev traveled to Mongolia, collected musical instruments from the Kazakhs living there, and then composed the ensemble of folk instruments. After all, most of the musical instruments have gone with people who left the country, including people who left this world. In Soviet Kazakhstan, it was said that the past of people, including the cultural one, was dark and joyless. Meanwhile, many pre-revolutionary travelers have certainly noted the love of nomads to music. It seems that the whole Kazakh steppe is singing, wrote the famous researcher Grigory Potanin. Expeditions led by the scientist Bolat Sarıbayev gave us the opportunity to see the rich musical arsenal of the steppe people. He did not only talk and write down the words of aksakals, elder people, about instruments of the Kazakhs, but also did a lot of research work in the archives and studied the notes of travelers who visited the steppe. For example, such instruments as sherter was found by him in the works of Zaletsky, the writer. They managed to restore this instrument with the help of etching with a depiction of sherter and its description in the book, The Life in the Kazakh Steppes.
Прародителем и домбры, и кобыза является шертер. Вот здесь изумительная гравюра.
An instrument sherter appeared before the dombra and kobuz. Here is the amazing work of Zaletsky, where the storyteller Mirzakai is sitting in the yurt among his fellows and telling the ancient legends and tales and playing the sherter. It was an instrument without a soundboard, string made of horsehair on the top, and people used to play sherter by plucking or bowing the strings. And thus the varieties of kobuz and dombra appeared.
То щипком, то смычком. Отсюда родились разновидности и кобыза, и дамбри.
Usually, archaeologists find the musical instruments, and together with musicologists, they try to understand what kind of instrument of musical world they found. So they found an instrument called jelbuaz. For a long time, the researchers heard about it only in the legends. For example, in one of the legends, a shaman used jelbuaz during his magical rituals and thus made the stones roll around him. The researchers thought that it was an instrument like a violin. But after finding the jelbuaz in the mounds, they were amazed. It was a bagpipe, and it is considered to be the oldest one in the world. This musical instrument appeared more than 2,500 years ago. The researcher, Zataevich, described and brought jelbuaz back to life. Thanks to him, more than 20 folk instruments were brought back to life. The technological production process of saz-sirnai consists of the following stages. Clay, rock is mixed with water, it becomes a dough-like elastic mass, and the instrument is molded from this mass and then burned. For ancient nomads, molding from clay is an analogy of the creation of man from clay. And further burning is not only the transformation into a solid instrument, but a kind of consecration by the fire of the great Tingri, deity of the early Turkic people. That is why musicologists consider saz-sirnai not only as a shepherd's instrument or toy for children, but also as something more specific. Specialists note that the most ancient instruments have a picture of the sun-headed deity on the top, and it symbolizes the magical power of sound. There are some instruments with different patterns or covered with glaze. Probably in ancient times, ornaments of saz-sirnai had a certain meaning, which is lost now. My dombra can show my cry from the heart. You are the best I have ever had. You are my sadness. You are my joy. You are the source of hope and strength. You are the reflection of my soul and a rush of passions. You are the confession of tender feelings. You are the storm in my breast. The musical heritage of people and professional performers is associated with the dombra. There are several sources confirming the antiquity of the two-stringed instrument. It is a rock drawing that dates back to 2nd millennia BC and finding of archaeologists who discovered a prototype of the dombra among the Saka tribes, which is 2,000 years old. It is believed that this instrument came to the Slavs from the steppe, and it is called domra. A famous traveler of the 13th century, Marco Polo, described how the Turkic nomads played the dombra before starting the battle, and inspired confidence and prepared themselves for the battle. But why a completely different dombra with different forms and 3 strings is shown on the old photographs and pictures, for example, on the picture with a bai. Specialists note that there were about 24 different types of dombra on the territory of Kazakhstan. Of course, it is difficult to imagine that people played the same instrument on such a huge territory with the ethnos, with clearly expressed regional features of cultural heritage and traditions. But the 3-string dombra was almost forgotten until Bolat Zataevich started the study of this instrument in the 60s of the last century. By the way, Baojan plays the exact copy of a bai's dombra. The Kazakh philosopher, poet, and musician personally handed this instrument to the Regional Museum of Semey in 1885.
В восточном регионе пропагандировали этот инструмент, трехструнную домбру.
The 3-string dombra was spread in the eastern region. In Semirechye, there were also musicians who preferred to play the 3-string dombra. I play this instrument, I like it more. Sound is very mild and smooth. The timbre is very soft.
И моя душа с этим инструментом.
The history of music passed hard times when instruments were prohibited and declared illegal. Sapai, a noisy Uzbek musical instrument, is considered to have connections with evil. Surnay and Khorezm is still associated with the name of Satan. Anyway, dombra survived and is used as a social instrument. The Kazakh artistic class, Salserey, showed how it can be good for witty contests between poet improvisers. Researchers note that rhythmic works of dombra repeat all possible rhythms of horse running. The Jigit could be proud not only of the art of the rider, but also the skill of playing dombra.
Я вам расскажу одну историю. В Семиречье жил такой Кишек Нурмагамбет.
I'll tell you a story about Tu Kuishi, musician who plays the dombra, who lived in Semirechye, Nurmagambet and Nurgozha.
Тартас. Нургожа начал играть ножом, поглаживая струны, начал играть.
Once they met and began the competition, Nurgozha began to play with a knife on the strings. Nurmagambet was a noble Kuishi, and he could not lose.
И начал играть ответно, начал играть лезвие. Чтобы не порвать струны, вот это мастерство именно человека. То есть
Thus he took the blade and began playing with it.
Поглаживая струны. Тот что сделал? Вот проиграл, он еще вдобавок снял.
In addition, he took off his boot and began to play with his feet.
У нас говорят башпай. Вот, начал играть ногами. И вот такие...
There were many of such stories.
То есть такие истории у нас часто встречаются.
Tatimbet Kazanggap Uli also had the ability to play the dombra with blade and heel. He was a country ruler, diplomat, well-known musician of the 19th century, and founder of the Central Kazakhstan School of Kyu, performance in Sherpe style. One of his kyus is called heel kyu, okshe kyu.
Был конкурс, кто даст лучший ответ на поставленный вопрос. А вопрос был непростой. Что на свете?
Tatimbet took part in the competition between Aksakal Akins, elder poet improvisers, and the task was to give the best answer for the question, what is eternal in the world? Tatimbet started. When the clouds hide the peaks of mountains, it seems that the death came to our valleys. It is cruel and powerful. The river is frozen, the sun and the moon sets down, the earth is buried under the snow. And only poetry is still alive and will never die.
Земля погребена в снега, и лишь поэзия одна. Ее дыханию не подвластна.
But let's get back to the dombra. Its third additional string was mainly used as a source of constant tone. This feature led to the musical mystical world when music was not a social entertainment, but a way of communicating with higher powers. Now, such constant tone effect is called meditative. Another feature is that the more social an instrument is, the easier it goes through times. Instruments which were used by Bakshi shamans have harder stories.
Самый главный инструмент у баксы – это кобыс, кыл-кобыс, то есть инструмент.
The most important instrument that shaman uses is kobuz, kul-kobuz, instrument with strings made of horsehair. It is interesting. Why exactly horsehair? Because musically gifted people notice that horsehair gives a specific sound.
Волос, как и на смычке, на инструменте звучит особенно.
The word kobuz originally meant musical instrument. Hence, there are so many types: kul kobuz, shan kobuz, jaharp, mez kobuz. There is an amazing legend full of mystique and tengri symbols. Once a man with the name Korkut lived in the steppe. The thoughts about the death of man tormented him a lot. Everything showed the hollow and nothingness. The fallen trunk of the tree, grass burnt out under the sun, stones on the rocks. The life of man is short, and how to accept this? One day, Korkut made shargai of wood, the first kobuz, pulled camel skin on it, put strings made of horsehair and played. He put his soul into the sound of the kobuz. The melody spread all over the steppe, reached people, animals, and birds. Even time had stopped, and death had been listening to these sounds. Since then, the melodies of Korkut and kobuz created by him have been spread all over the world, and the name of Korkut remained immortal in kobuz's strings and in the memory of people. In comparison with this poetic history, here is the opinion of historians. Originally, people rubbed the string of one bow with the other, and thus the sounds came. The Bulgarian scientist Slavy Donchev stated so. It should be noted that in the annals of the Tang dynasty, which was founded by the Chinese descendants of the Turks, and which is associated with the epoch of the highest power of Tianxia, the bowed string instrument, hukin, is mentioned, and it is said that it has Mongol origin. Such instruments exist not only among the Kazakhs. The Kyrgyz people have an instrument called kilkiyak. The Karakalpaks call the same instrument kobuz. The Uzbeks also have such an instrument. All these instruments are similar to each other. Previously, it was an attribute of shamans. Zhirao, poet improvisers, and storytellers also use them. Epic tales were accompanied by kobuz. Later, this instrument became a social instrument. Ikhlas, Kazakh composer and kuishi, started using it solo. There are many cues of Ikhlas and Korkut that are still alive. One of the peculiarities of kobuz is that Korkut is a common Turkic figure, but only the Kazakhs saved Korkut's cues. Suddenly, Oken strongly held a bow over kobuz's strings and began to play. The plaintive, heart-rending sounds poured among the breathless crowd. Heartbreaking stream of sadness and longing of people wandering along the monotonous, desolate steppe was heard in play of shaman. Kyrgyz, Kazakhs held their breath and plunged into meditation. Once I asked whether he met someone who could play better than he did, and Oken proudly replied, "If someone had played kobuz better than me, I would have broken my kobuz and thrown it into the fire. It would not take the bow anymore." Kobuz was an objectionable instrument for a long time. The authorities believed so as it had a mystical meaning and reminded people of their pagan beliefs. But since the 30s of the last century, a new wave in music has begun, and musicians have tried to adapt some folk instruments to play in the orchestra. Kobuz horsehair strings were replaced with iron strings, and the specific shamanic sound disappeared. The stage version of this instrument often resembled a violin that was held in a different way. But researchers and musicians, ethnographers have returned the initial image of the instrument. Here is how Eugene Brusilovsky described it. There was a mirror inside kobuz, and the top was decorated with a bunch of owl feathers. In the dark yurt, the mirror reflected the reddish color of the fireplace, and shaman played kobuz and shouted his incantations. Knack, knack! And owl feathers began to move and tremble with his scream. This action can change thoughts of a naive steppe person and dictated him the will of the higher forces, which he had to obey blindly. In the hands of ordinary musicians, the melody of kobuz was sad and reflected the life of the Kazakh people, who wandered through the vast steppe in search of the land of happiness, Jer Uyuk. In general, kobuz was the instrument with pessimistic sounds. Kobuz was considered to be a shaman instrument due to its extraordinary ability to transmit the sounds of animals: howl of a wolf, scream of an eagle, swan song. Playing such an instrument, they did not show their prowess, but cured people with its help. Ensemble Turan tours very often. Once, before the beginning of the performance in Taiwan, the organizers asked the musicians to show their action. One of the compositions was called Turan, which is sung with expressive throat singing. After listening to it, the organizers asked the Kazakh artist to exclude it from the performance. They explained that the Chinese listener fears throat singing, and it reminds them of the raids of the steppe troops. And indeed, the nomads always sang before raids and battles and psychologically affected the enemy.
Горловое гортанное пение, оно, по сути, является, можно сказать, шаманским видом пения.
The throat singing, in fact, is shamanic. Originally was used during ancient rituals. It is a sound that heals a person and makes him fall into a meditative state, a certain state of trance.
Состояние транса. Позже, посредством горлового пения, музыканты, можно сказать, начинали.
Later, musicians began to sing heroic epics using throat singing. And it became an instrument of storytellers. Nowadays, it is not entirely a social instrument. It encloses a person into the past, into some state of trance. In any way, this kind of singing is still very closely intertwined with ancient beliefs and shamanic practices. From time immemorial, both men and women can use throat singing, but mostly men were involved in this kind of singing. Women also could sing, and this is a vivid example of shamanism. Unfortunately, it is known that there was a period of life of the Kazakh people when shamanism was persecuted like any religious component.
Конечно, эта религиозная составляющая, она преследовалась как и со стороны исламизации, также и со стороны.
There was pressure from Islam and from the party.
Партии, это период Советского Союза, да. То есть по истории мы знаем, что мы всегда были атеистами в период Советского Союза, и, конечно же, подобные вещи.
After that, there were no shamans left in Kazakhstan.
Такого масштаба, что практически шаманов у нас в Казахстане не осталось.
The human voice is the most ancient musical instrument. Originally, people addressed the higher forces either with prayer or with song. Throat singing is typical for almost all representatives of the Turkic world. However, the researchers believe that the Tyrolean yodeling is one of the type of throat singing. This art existed in the Great Steppe in the period of the Scythians, Huns, and ancient Turks. But nowadays, folk performers who use throat singing are only on the territory of the modern Kizloda region. And again, they can sing only that kind which was used for epic tales. The most mystical, low type of performance, kirgira, remains in oblivion. The one who listens to the steppe can reveal its mysteries. Such people as Bolat Saribayev and his associates managed to unlock some of them. And most probably, we still do not know many secrets of the Turkic musical instruments.